Gene Autry started with nothing. $8 saved from baling hay. Bought his first guitar. By the time he died at 91, he owned a baseball team, television stations, and enough real estate to fill a map. But the strangest part of his story is not how he made the money. It is what happened after he was gone. 2 marriages, 0 children, a 34-year age gap that raised eyebrows across Hollywood, and a fortune that had to go somewhere when there was no family left to claim it. 28 years later, the answer is more complicated than anyone thought. Hardest beginning. Gene Autry did not start life with luck on his side. He was born Orvin Grover Autry on September 29, 1907, on a tiny tenant farm near Tioga in Grayson County, Texas. His father, Delbert Autry, worked as a horse trader bold, but often gone chasing deals that rarely held together. His mother, Alnora Osmond, was frail and sickly, the kind of illness that sits in a house like weather and makes everyone live quietly around it. The family scraped by on rented land, moving back and forth between Texas and Oklahoma, always chasing a fresh start that never arrived. When Delbert landed in prison for bootlegging around 1918, serving about 2 years, the whole family felt the floor drop out. Gene was only 11, but suddenly he was doing the heavy lifting at home. It was early mornings, hard hands, and the steady fear of what would happen next. By age 6, he was already doing farm labor. He shined shoes, swept barber shops for pennies, then headed back to whatever needed doing at home. The family bounced to Ashila, Oklahoma, then settled near Ravia in Johnston County in the early 1920s, trying to hang on to stability. But stability never liked staying with them. In the middle of all this, Gene had one steady voice. His grandfather, William T. Autry, a strict Baptist preacher who filled the family's world with hymns and hard rules about right and wrong. Gene sang in church early, and those songs got into his bones. He learned that a person could be poor and still keep their word. He learned that you could take a beating from life and still try to stand straight. The guitar that changed everything. In 1919, when he was about 12, Gene saved exactly $8 from haywork on Uncle Cal's farm. The pay was tiny, about 5 cents a bale. Some days he pushed through 100 bales in the heat. $8 was not a hobby amount for that family. It was food money. He saved it anyway and ordered a guitar from the Sears Roebuck catalog, paying cash. That guitar changed the air around him. He started playing at a Tioga cafe and school events. By his mid-teens, he could earn about $1 a night in tips, mixing hymns with popular tunes. He picked up sounds from the radio, including the yodel style of singers like Jimmie Rodgers. Music gave him a way to feel like he was moving forward instead of just surviving. By 1923, he was hauling baggage at the Frisco Railroad Depot in Ravia. But he had a reason he wanted telegraph lessons. He wanted a skill that could pay real money. By 17, he was earning about $30 a month as a relief operator. By 1925, he left school and leaned into railroad work because the family needed money more than a diploma. The Will Rogers moment. Railroad nights were long, and that is where the next turn happened. Gene took a telegraph job with the St. Louis-San Francisco Railway in Chelsea, Oklahoma. It was quiet work, especially at night, and he would strum his guitar to stay awake, sometimes yodeling softly into the empty space. Then one night, somewhere between 1926 and 1928, a famous visitor walked into that depot to send a telegram. It was Will Rogers, the Oklahoma cowboy humorist, already a national name. Rogers heard Gene singing and froze. He told the young telegrapher that a voice like that belonged on the radio, not stuck behind wires. Just like that, Gene had a new thought planted in him, one that would not leave. He tried to chase it fast, heading to New York in 1928. It went badly. He found no real work, ran through his money, and returned to Oklahoma, broke and embarrassed. It could have been the end. Instead, it toughened him up. He went back to local dances, back to odd shows, back to railroad stations, and kept singing. The breakthrough. That stubbornness finally opened a door in Tulsa. By late 1928 or early 1929, he got on Cowboy radio, and the station started billing him as a yodeling cowboy. People listened, Then they showed up. Crowds reached 1,000 or more at live events, and his pay jumped into the 50 to 100 a week range. The real explosion came in 1931, with That Silver-Haired Daddy of Mine, recorded with his friend Jimmy Long on October 29, 1931. The song hit hard during the Great Depression because it sounded like longing, family, and regret, all the things people carried quietly. It sold about 500,000 copies early on, turning him from a radio name into something bigger. The success put him on WLS Chicago's National Barn Dance, one of the biggest stages in country music at the time. Hollywood and the war years. Hollywood grabbed him in 1934. From 1934 to 1953, he made 93 feature films, sometimes turning out several in a single year, always singing, always writing, always keeping the promise of the character people believed in. His horse, Champion, became a star too, appearing across dozens of films. Then came the moment that tested everything. On July 26, 1942, Gene Autry did something almost nobody expected. He enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps at age 35, the maximum draft age. At that moment, he was making about $600,000 a year from movies and radio, roughly $10 million today. Fans tuned in live to his Melody Ranch broadcast and listened as he took the oath from Luke Field in Arizona. Republic Pictures begged him to stay behind and do public relations work like many other stars. Gene refused. He did not want a comfortable role. He had a private pilot's license and pushed for real flight training. The moment he stepped into uniform, his pay dropped to $125 a month. Back home, the studio started reissuing his older films and built up Roy Rogers as the new king of the Cowboys. Autry flew C-109 Liberator, tankers converted B-24 bombers, built to haul fuel across the China-Burma-India theater. The most feared part of that world was the Hump, a deadly air route over the Himalayas where peaks rose to 15,000 feet and weather turned savage without warning. Crews dealt with monsoons, ice, and Japanese fighters. By late 1943, losses had climbed into the hundreds of planes and more than 1,000 lives. Later, he led a small USO group on a long South Pacific tour, reaching remote islands like Guadalcanal and New Guinea. He performed under blackout conditions, singing songs people knew by heart, including Back in the Saddle Again. When he stood on those island stages in 1945, he was not sending comfort from far away. He was bringing it in person. The Empire Builder. When Autry returned, his career engine had stalled. Roy Rogers had topped Cowboy polls from 1943 to 1947. But Autry was not the kind of man who accepted a slow fade. After his honorable discharge in 1946, he brought Melody Ranch back on CBS and kept it running until 1956. He launched Flying A Productions in 1951 to steer his own future. His wealth came back in waves. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, in 1949, became a huge hit, reaching gold record status. And here is a timely connection. In November 2025. The Autry Museum of the American West announced a major centennial exhibition celebrating the radio broadcast that launched that iconic song, reminding a new generation how one reluctant recording changed Christmas music forever. Beyond entertainment, he started owning real assets, including KTLA and other radio stations. On January 14, 1964, he bought KTLA in Los Angeles from Paramount Pictures for exactly $12 million. In 1982, the station was sold in a major deal valued at $245 million. That jump proved he did not just ride luck. He understood value before others did. Then he shocked sports fans. On December 20, 1960, he won Major League Baseball's expansion franchise for the Los Angeles Angels, who debuted on April 11, 1961. He owned the team for decades. For many people, that was the moment he stopped being only a movie cowboy and became something else entirely. In 1995, a year before his death, the Angels honored him with a statue still standing outside Angel Stadium, a reminder that the cowboy once owned the diamond. His wealth spread into real estate, hotels, oil wells, and land holdings. People argued about his exact net worth at the end, But what mattered most was how he got there. He did not just cash paychecks. He bought pieces of the world that could keep earning long after the spotlight moved on. 2 marriages, no heirs. While all of that was happening, his private life had its own sharp turns. He married Ina May Spivey in 1932. She was a 21-year-old aspiring music teacher, and they eloped in St. Louis on April Fool's Day. The marriage lasted nearly 48 years. She pushed him toward Hollywood and encouraged him to record Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, even when he doubted it. They had no children. When Ina died of cancer on May 19, 1980, it broke him. He was 72, and people around him saw a loneliness they had never seen before. He withdrew and carried the loss in silence. Then came the move that stunned the public. Just 14 months after Ina's death, Autry married again. On July 19, 1981, he wed Jackie Evelyn Elam at a church in Burbank. He was 73, she was 39, a 34-year age gap that made headlines. Jackie had met him years earlier in 1964 at Security Pacific Bank in Palm Springs, where she rose from switchboard operator to vice president by age 32. They had no children either, and that fact would matter more than anyone expected. The final chapter and what came after. Gene Autry died on October 2, 1998, at his Studio City home in Los Angeles from lymphoma, just 3 days after turning 91. At the time, Forbes ranked him among America's 400 richest, with wealth tied to decades of work and ownership. The strange detail that lingered: he built everything, but he left no children behind. Because there was no direct heir, his estate and legacy flowed into foundations, museums, and long-term projects rather than a family dynasty. Jackie became the main steward of the Autry name, and the Autry Foundation, helping expand and protect the Autry Museum of the American West. 28 years later, the answer to where his fortune went is clearer. The Autry Museum of the American West, located in Los Angeles' Griffith Park, has grown into a major cultural institution. In 2025, the museum celebrated its 35th anniversary with expanded exhibitions, including a deep dive into Autry's military service and his complex legacy as both entertainer and businessman. The museum houses over 500,000 artifacts, from his original 1919 guitar to his Angels memorabilia. Beyond the museum, the Autry Foundation has donated millions to Western heritage preservation, scholarship programs, and Native American initiatives, recently partnering with the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian on a major 2026 exhibition about cowboy and indigenous histories. His media holdings, sold decades ago, continue to generate value for their current owners, and the Angels, now owned by different hands, still honor his memory with annual Gene Autry Night at the ballpark. Still, his image as the clean family values cowboy had layers that people discuss more openly after his death. Stories circulated about a long affair with Gail Davis, the star of Annie Oakley, during his marriage to Ina. Yet the strange truth is that both sides existed at once. The shy man who could barely handle a date also became the bold businessman who fought studios, bought stations, and owned a baseball team. The performer who sang about being back in the saddle also flew dangerous missions and walked onto remote island stages under blackout rules just to help homesick troops feel human again. The legacy that chose its own path. What makes Autry's story so unusual is that he had every reason to leave a dynastic fortune. He had the money, the power, and the platform. But he had no children, and his second marriage produced no heirs either. Some wealthy men in his position scrambled to find distant cousins or adopt heirs. Autry did not. Instead, he planned for something bigger than bloodlines. His will established trusts that prioritized the museum, the foundation, and the preservation of Western American history. Jackie, who died in 2024, continued that mission until her final days. She never remarried. She devoted herself to protecting his name and expanding his philanthropic reach. 28 years after his death, the Autry family in the traditional sense simply does not exist. But the Autry legacy is more visible than ever. Millions of visitors walk through the museum each year. The songs are streamed billions of times, And every baseball season, when the Angels take the field, fans still remember the cowboy who owned the team. His headstone reads, "Loving husband" among his honors. It feels like a simple line beside a complicated life. The singing cowboy became a tycoon. The tycoon became a legend. And the legend passed on an empire, not through blood, but through the legacy he chose to build. No children, no dynasty, no family drama. Just a museum, a foundation, and the quiet truth that sometimes the richest legacy is the one you give away.